Welcome to Propel, a podcast by Fellowship Pacific to propel you and your ministry forward in the mission God has for you. I'm your host, Jessica Powell, and in today's episode, you'll get to listen in as Elizabeth Faulkner from our leadership development team talks with Shawn Barden. Shawn is the lead pastor of Mountainside Community Church, one church that meets in two locations, in Fernie and in Sparwood, BC. You'll get to hear about how God spoke to Shawn months before the COVID-19 crisis started, preparing him to be ready in his heart for what God would call him and his church to do. And you'll hear Shawn share about how they are being innovative in mobilizing their church and community to care for those who are most vulnerable in their community. So, let's listen in now to Elizabeth's conversation with Shawn Barden. Okay, well, I want to welcome you to the Fellowship Pacific podcast. And today it's Elizabeth Faulkner here from the leadership development team at Fellowship Pacific. And I'm lucky to be here today with Shawn Barden from Mountainside Church in Fernie, British Columbia, a beautiful place with the best bagels. So love the bagels in Fernie. And it's kind of fun to get to do this because Shawn and I have known each other since Northwest Baptist College days, way back in the 90s.
Right.
Shawn, when you were kind of a skinny guitar player leading us to chapel.
And now I'm a gray, skinny guitar player. So that's the only thing. You look exactly the same, but I don't look anything like we did in our college days.
Yeah. So I was thinking we should think of this podcast as, a conversation sitting on the hot spot down in the foyer of the old Northwest building. So some of you out there will remember that well.
Right.
So this is kind of an honor and fun. And I was thinking, this right now seems like a long way away from those carefree days with what we're going through right now with the coronavirus. And I mean, obviously a lot has changed since then. But first of all, Shawn, I wonder, can you just tell us a little, just briefly about yourself and your family, and then maybe tell us about your church. Let us know, what do you love about it? What's unique about it? What are some of its strengths?
So my wife, Kimberly, is a physician. So she is right in the middle of a lot of strategic planning. She's on a bunch of committees and provincial boards that are coming up with, plan A's and plan B's and plan C's for different scenarios. And so she's been in the thick of this for quite a while. We have three girls, 14, 12, and 10 years old, Rachel, Sarah, and Lily. And so they're not at school and at home like a lot of your kids. And so, of course, like everybody, our world has just, all of our plans have just been upended. We live in Fernie, which we love. Rolling Stones magazine called it the coolest small town in North America. And it is it's just a really great community. It's got a really good community spirit. It's got a beautiful downtown. It's got great restaurants and lots of recreation, and people who live here really love being here. And so we're very privileged to get to call this home. We've been here for 14 years, I think, maybe going on to 15 years. Our church we've got two campuses in Fernie and then a second campus down in Sparwood. And both of our campuses are doing well and are growing. We have it's a really, really great church. We have a really great staff team. Really proud of our staff team. We have a staff team of 9, and they are super great. Some up and coming young pastors, some veterans like Mel Reimer as our campus pastor in Sparwood as a familiar name, and so we're really fortunate. One of the things I love about our church family is like there's just a wealth of gifts in our body, and it's just really just people who just really, really love Jesus. There's a lot of people in our church who just you look at them and you just know that they know Jesus, and all the beautiful stuff that comes from that, like in their life and what they prioritize in their life and how they love neighbors. And so our church just reaps the fruit of a lot of people who really, really love Jesus. And I think that's the thing I probably love the most about our church. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to your church and
That's
got to
right. You were
speak
the first
there.
female who's ever preached in our church.
I
High five
was.
to you. Yeah,
It was awesome,
yeah.
and you have some of the most friendly, genuine people that I've met, and your staff is amazing.
Mhm.
So we got to do the Berkman there, David and
That's
I,
right.
and Mike, and just the unity, and everybody just seems to be on board with what you're doing. So you seem pretty blessed with that. Yeah. Just wondering with this whole coronavirus, you've mentioned your wife is a physician. I mean, you're a lead pastor at a church, you have 3 girls. So can you go in a little deeper how this has affected you personally?
Yeah, I think my wife has been working more in the last month than she has ever worked. Lots of Zoom calls, and she's on lots of committees, and committees for interior health region, and trying to strategize how they're going to respond, and so she's been very, very busy. And of course, all of their planning and their strategizing is trying to accommodate the worst case scenarios. And so there's been lots of dire dire predictions that I have heard, and I get little snippets of maybe a little bit of inside information. And so yeah, just the sense of the gravity of what we're into, and where this could go has been quite heavy in our home for the last while. And so that's definitely taken a toll, of course, on our frontline healthcare workers, and those administrators who are trying to come up with plans. And so we felt the weight of that. And then, of course, as we're trying to adjust, it's been a little bit, the last few weeks, it felt like everything kind of changed so quickly and so dramatically. And so there was this bit of a sprint for the last 3 weeks of how do we retool, and how do we readjust. And so we're frantically trying to figure out how to do online services, and then how do we still connect with our people. And then we've launched some new initiatives into our community. And so there's been lots of kind of like an entrepreneurial spirit in the last 3 weeks of doing things new. And that carries some adrenaline with that, and there's some excitement that comes with that. But we're quickly realizing that this is a marathon that we're in, and not a sprint. And so have to pace ourselves, and have to really start to strategically think, what does our church look like, what does carrying out our mission look like in 8 months from now. Because I do think the landscape has changed, and all of those strategies and structures that we've relied upon to carry out mission, those are all off the table now. And so our plan is we're going to try to get through Easter, and then we're going to have to do some fairly intensive strategic thinking for 12 months, 16 months out, in case things don't change, or if this becomes kind of the new norm for a long time. How do we continue to make disciples, and how do we continue to expand our impact in our community, and carry out our mission? So I feel like we're fairly well situated with our staff team, that we've got some entrepreneurial thinkers and some outside the box thinkers, and we've got a diverse staff team that we're able to kind of shift staffing roles on the fly, and people who are taking parts of their job description, which was never part of their job description when they signed up, is people are stepping into that. And so I feel like we're fairly well situated to adapt, and to be more strategic. But all of that has been a bit overwhelming for as the lead pastor. And then, of course, wanting to both protect the church in this time and care for your staff, and everybody's financial situation is changing, and the weight of all that, and how do we navigate that is lead pastors who are listening to that, they know that, and they carry that. And it's nothing unique that we're facing. It's everybody is facing this. But yeah, my kids have kind of settled down. There was definitely some fear when my wife went back into clinic and back to emergency, and because she's frontline, and just on a personal note, like was making calls, to some of the contractors in town, trying to get trying to get masks and trying to get face shields and trying to get stuff for my wife. And just because of the shortage that we keep hearing about in the news on the PPEs is a reality. And so I think all that stuff of my kids were seeing that, I think that caused their anxiety to ramp up. And so we've had to have some family meetings to talk about stuff, that we're okay and God's in control and mom's being really careful. And
Yeah.
And we think things have kind of settled down. But yeah.
Good. So you've had a lot swirling around.
Yeah, for sure.
In your head and in your family. But one of the things that was really interesting when we talked a couple of weeks ago is how you thought God was preparing you in advance of this.
Right.
And I was very, I was very impacted by that, because it seemed like God had prompted you and kind of prepared you to be ready for this.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So there's two kind of things. One is this little, I usually don't talk about this type of stuff because it's a little bit odd, but I have, a handful of times in the last 20 years, I've had what I would call like a prophetic dream, where I just have a really clear sense that God was trying to get my attention and he was trying to communicate. And they're different than, those dreams where it was the pizza the night before and you're like, that was weird. Was that God? I've had a handful of times where I just knew that I knew. And then had, the things that I thought God was trying to say confirmed really quickly in scripture in the next couple of days preceding. And in January, I had a dream that I woke up from, and I was sure that God was trying to get my attention. And it had to do with our hospital, and I was going to go to the hospital for probably a visitation or something, I don't know. And the scene at the hospital was one of, like, people in those classic movie yellow hazmat suits, and there was plastic everywhere, and there was people shouting orders and telling me to go back, and I couldn't go in. And I woke up from that. I was like, I had just had this deep sense that God was saying, yeah, that things are going to be changing health-wise. And this was back in mid-January, and I kind of filed it away, and then we started getting reports of the cruise ship, the virus on these cruise ships, and then reports of it starting to kind of spread, and I was told our staff that, yeah, this is gonna be bad, this is gonna be serious, and they all thought I was Chicken Little. They're all like rolling their eyes. So I had a sense that something was gonna happen and something was gonna change, and so really trying to encourage our staff along those lines to get ready for that, not even knowing what getting ready really looked like. But I felt like God was communicating that way. And then even structurally, we went and acquired a whole video production studio, 6 or 8 months ago, that we haven't set up and used for the plans of really upping our video production of our services, so that we can possibly plant a third campus. That's been a hankering of Mel's, is to plant another church, and so we had all that equipment, and we have some of the expertise actually in our church to be able to use all that, but we just haven't. And so actually part of our plan was during spring break, when we were shutting down some of our programming, we were going to be doing some renos in our building to try to facilitate for all this stuff. And so it just so happened that when we started shutting down services, we had the equipment and actually the capability to start to produce a really higher end video production for a smaller church. And so that was really, like, I just feel like that was God's grace and God's preparation for us to allow us to fairly quickly transition out of our regular gatherings into a digital gathering, a live digital gathering, without it, like, without us looking like that Italian priest who went viral, who had all his filters on his phone. And because if it was left to me, and he had the Elton John sunglasses on. And anyway, if it was left
Oh,
to
I
me,
missed that. I'm gonna have
oh
to go
yeah,
watch
yeah,
that.
yeah. You have to go. You have to go
That's
search it.
awesome.
If it was left to me, that is what our video production would look like. So
Yes.
we're really, really grateful that we felt like we were prepared for that.
That's wonderful. It's
Yeah.
actually, I keep hearing stories around our region and from other people we're talking about how God is kind of uniquely prepared churches to have the right people or the equipment or the help of somebody else just to be able to serve their churches during this time. So that's amazing and a good story to remember on the bad days, right?
Totally.
When this seems difficult. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's just, I just love hearing stories of God, how God prepares us in advance for the difficult times. And yeah, so that's pretty cool. So tell me about how you're caring for your church. And I know we're going to talk about how you're been caring for your church, and then also how God has kind of prompted you for some community initiatives, which you've already kind of mentioned. But why don't we start talking about how are you taking care of your church, or how's your church taking care of each other right now?
Yeah. Um, we have a church body that is really, really well connected, and we've got some really strong missional communities and people who have structured a rhythm of life where they're just in each other's lives for the long haul, and are doing their discipleship together and are pursuing Jesus's mission together. And so we had a lot of the kind of the relational infrastructures in place where people's relational connection is way deeper than just our Sunday gatherings. And so that is to the credit of our small group leaders and our missional community leaders and some of the people who are leading our discipleship huddles. So they're continuing to do what they were doing. They're continuing to connect online, and they're continuing to strategize a bit as to what does it look like for us to be in rhythm together when we're not all in the same room together. But so those things have just continued, and because those were just such a part of people's lifestyle now, that there was no question that they were going to figure out a way to continue to keep them a part of their lifestyle, just like we're still all eating and we're still, you know what I mean? Like it's just those rhythms of our lifestyle are still happening. So that's credit to all of those, our lay leaders and some of our staff who make that happen. We went and we have a number of people in our church who have been trained and equipped through a ministry we call Stephen's Ministry, and so they're equipped for one-on-one pastoral care and supportive listening. And so we've mobilized all of them, and as well as some of our elders and those who are really have they're spiritually gifted as pastors. They've got that spiritual gifting. And we have kind of broke our whole church body into kind of groups of 8, and they've all been assigned around 8 people. And so they check in on them 2 times a week, see how they're doing, both to encourage them, to pray with them, to have some relational connection, but also to kind of triage to see how people are doing. And then if there are issues that are like, if there's physical issues that need to be met, then we have a whole infrastructure in place where we can make sure that people get groceries, or if some elderly lady, and her faucet is leaking and she can't get somebody to come in and to repair it. Sorry, phone's ringing here.
Oh, no worries.
If somebody can't get in to repair it, we can connect them with different gifts in our body. So they've been triaging how people are doing, both spiritually, emotionally, and also physically, and then connecting them up if they feel like it's kind of outside of their scope of being able to meet those needs. So it's our effort to try to make sure nobody is kind of fallen through the cracks at this time. And it's also it's utilizing those gifts that are in our body. Like we've got a ton of people who are really good at caring. Some of our best pastors in our church are not pastors on our staff. We've got some people who are really formidably gifted in that way. And so they're doing that. So that's helping us connect. We do an online, we do a digital Zoom prayer meeting on Wednesday nights, where we come together, and then we break out into kind of a breakout rooms where we're praying together. And that's part of our weekly rhythm that has been, I think we had, I don't know if we had like 60 or 70 people on last
That's
time together
awesome.
praying. So that's really
Yeah.
good. And we hope that will continue to grow. And it's a chance for people to kind of check in and share their prayer requests, so we can pray for each other, but also then together laboring some of these bigger prayer items that are worth our whole church putting our faith and our attention towards. So yeah, so those are some of the things right kind of off the top of my head of how we're trying to maintain caring for our church.
Well, I love how you're being intentional and breaking them up into smaller chunks and dividing that up and utilizing people's gifts as they're gifted. And and I know when we were talking before, that kind of triage idea really sparked kind of my interest, because I thought that was a great way to make sure that those physical needs got taken care of. Okay, well, tell us about this initiative in your community and what you're doing. How did that come about? Yeah.
So we started something. So myself and a couple of our other key leaders got together. Our board chairman and another board member got together, and we basically started with, okay, if things go the way that we think they're going to go in our community, what does it look like for us to serve our community, to step into the gap? And we're all really motivated by all of those stories we know in church history, when crisis would hit a community and pandemics would come in and people would panic and people would flee, and the people who stepped up and cared, and there's people who put themselves at even at risk, even at personal risk, in order to love and care for neighbors, were the believers, and that earned credibility for the gospel. And I remember a book I read by Mark Knoll. He even chalked that up as one of the 5 or 6 key foundational reasons why the early church was able to grow, was that regular people serving their neighbors in times of crisis really it created space for the gospel message to be shared. And so that was in our mind. And so we started saying, well, what would that look like for us in a way that's sustainable and measurable, but also meaningful in our community? And so we started thinking through, well, if people are quarantined, if people are self-isolating, especially the vulnerable, they're not going to be able to get groceries, they're not going to be able to go shopping. And so that's something that we could look after. We can make happen for that, for them. And so then it quickly began to morph into a kind of a structure that would both allow us to meet some of those physical needs around foods and medicines, but also what would it look like for us to kind of check in on people who are vulnerable or lonely, to see how they are doing. And so we put together kind of a structural team of some really gifted men and women from both of our campuses, and some really high capacity, like some really great administrators, some systems people. We have an emergency doctor who is on board. We've got some of our pastoral staff on board, and kind of think through, what would the structure look like, and then we put together kind of an organization, and kind of streamline our communication, started streamlining our systems about getting groceries to people, getting the word out to our community, and then it just really took off. We have over, I think, 100 volunteers who are all mobilized to help look after neighbors. And I think we've got a ton of them who are outside of our church, people from the community who have joined in. Both of the mayors in our town, in Sparwood and Fernie, are just on board, have been directing people towards our organization. The Elk Valley Emergency Response organization has called us and are kind of funneling all of those needs over towards our church community. The organization we started is called the Elk Valley COVID Support Team, and has its own kind of website. You can call up, you can email up, you get in kind of into the queue. We do groceries we deliver groceries Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Okay.
We figured out the whole structures with the grocery stores in town about how we pay for that. We've got money that has come in from the community to buy groceries for people who can't afford. We've had restaurants who have jumped on board who says we will start putting together ready to make meals for free, that you guys can now begin to determine who you think are in need, and we will give those to you. And so restaurants are now jumping on board. People just, in our town just want to help. And so I feel like this has kind of become a bit of a magnet that the community has come around. And, all the different organizations, the Hospice Society, they're all have kind of come to us and says, hey, we're kind of at your disposal. If you know somebody who you're connecting with, because we follow up with people both emotionally who with the call from our team, and those are all staffed by kind of Mountainsiders, our call team, to see how people are doing. But then we've able to connect them with resources for grief counseling or pastoral counseling the impact has just been, it's just been super great. We are all of the senior centers in town know about us. That's who initially we were thinking of as kind of the vulnerable. How do we look after the 70-year-old who needs groceries but really doesn't want to put themselves at risk, but they feel like they've got no other option. And so that's been growing, and it's just really great. I've just been fielding calls from the community who are just saying, I'm just so grateful for your church and the people in your church for doing this. And which just makes me really proud, because
it should.
That's what Jesus, isn't that what Jesus said, that let your light so shine that others would see your good works and glorify your Father. And that's our church, a handful of people. I mean, we get scores of people in our church who are making this happen, putting in significant volunteer hours behind the scenes to create the infrastructure, to hone the system. Our whole dispatch system has been all, nailed down. That we just got volunteers bringing groceries and connecting in people, and it's been super, super good. So, and again, it's like all those different latent gifts in our church, we've kind of focused them on a need, and just kind of unleashed them. And it's great. I can hardly organize a 2-car parade, so thankfully it's not me making that happen.
Well, I don't know, Shawn. I think you're a pretty good mobilizer and visionary person. So I just isn't it amazing, right? How God kind of prepared you, and then He's brought just the right people together for at the right time. And now, the shining the light thing is happening. It's pretty awesome. Do you have do you have a little story, like maybe one story from that, something that has come from that?
We oh man, I can think of lots, but I had a call from a lady in the community who she's her mom is in the community. She is in Calgary. And she called because she was so fearful about wanting to check in on her mom and wondering if she could come down, because her mom was self-isolating and couldn't get groceries. And then she wanted somebody to be able to check in on her. And so we were like, hey, we can look after this. And so we were able to go and get her groceries. But then I just love it. We've got a bunch of seniors from our church who are all kind of in lockdown in our senior center, who are checking in on the seniors in their group. And so she was just like over the moon, and so appreciative. And then we were able to share with her a bit about our church and kind of our motivation behind why we're doing these things. And there's lots of stories like that, and people in the front lines who are out. And also the other thing I super appreciate is that the volunteers from our community who are not tied to our church, we're seeing them come up, and I just some fabulous
Mm.
good-natured, good-hearted people that I was like, oh man, I just want you to meet Jesus and be
Yeah.
part of our church because
Yeah.
you are awesome.
Yeah.
And so we're be able to kind of create some relationships with people in our town who are
Yes.
just who are just great. Their heart is to care for people, and they just needed a mechanism and a structure in place where they could make themselves available to. So we're trusting that out of this we're going to see more
Yeah.
people connected into our community, because that's been our motivation all the way along, is that we always wanted to be Fernie's church. When people
Mm.
in our town think of, in a time of crisis or a time of spiritual questioning, if I was going to go anywhere,
Yeah.
I'd go to that church, because those people I know love our town. And I know if somebody knows God, I think they do. And so
Right.
that's always been part of our motivation for how we do church and how we engage with our community. And I feel like this crisis has given us an opportunity to kind of push into some of those underlying values and those underlying motivations.
Yeah, for sure. And just, yeah, so people know, you actually have provided some of your documents that helped you create that, which
Yeah.
are up on the Fellowship Pacific
Yeah.
website. So thank you very much, Shawn, for that, for helping us in that way.
Yeah,
Um,
and if somebody, they could just go to evcst.com, and you can kind of see
right.
our which is the website we have, and kind of the structure and the mechanism by which people get connected, and then we have kind of the whole system, the infrastructure behind that the people who dispatch volunteers and the take in the grocery list and all that type of stuff,
Yeah.
and the pharmacies are calling us when they have a delivery. Now all the pharmacies call us, so
That's
so that
awesome.
yeah, so it's quite, the network is growing. Yeah,
Yeah.
with each week it's growing.
Yeah, and I looked at the website and it's just so simple and
Yeah,
easy to figure out what you need and how to
yeah.
communicate that. So it's
Yeah, the
great.
only thing we wish we would have brainstormed of the name a little bit better
Oh
before we
yeah.
were all the EVCST. I still can't even get it right when I was like Elk
Yeah.
Valley COVID Support Team.
It's
I,
definitely a tongue
it
twister.
is. I wish we would have slowed down before we went and launched the website and thought through that a bit. But
Oh yeah, but
yeah,
it's kind of funny though.
yeah,
It adds some humor. Yeah. Um, so you kind of answered this, but I was watching a training course the other day on crisis leadership with Kerry Newhoff, and actually he said that one of the things about crisis is what does it make possible for organizations? And so I wonder if you could just say again, and you've kind of said this, but what do you think this crisis really makes possible for your church?
yeah. I think underlying the whole crisis are two giant fears. Um, it's the fear of a lack of control, and it's
Yeah.
the fear of death. Those are the two things that are coming right in close. And of course, those fears were there, and the reality of those things were there 3 months ago, just like they are now. But
Yeah.
it's like the kind of the facade of our sense of all these structures that we look to, that the kind of the scaffolding of our life that we kind of build around our jobs and the economy and our health, and those things are all kind of melting right before us. And so that's really, really unnerving. I mean, think how unnerving it is that because some guy decides he has a hankering to eat a bat for dinner,
Yeah.
because of that, the
Yeah.
plans of 7 billion people are all upended. $6 trillion is wiped out of the economy. Like
Yeah.
that's really unnerving,
It
that
is.
our whole world can get changed and turned upside down, that a lot of these foundational elements that we get our security from, or our perceived sense of security from,
Mhm.
are proven to be like shifting sands. And
Hmm.
so I think this is a huge opportunity, both to, as the church, to be fearless in our love, and and contagious in our hope, uh, that we don't crumble in fear
Hmm.
when everything around us is crumbling, because at the core of what we believe is that there is a good God who is powerful and in control, and he is just as in control of our lives today as he was last year, as he was 6 months ago.
Hmm.
And then also, as a people who believe that our greatest enemy of death has been defeated by Jesus, that Jesus came in and he destroyed the grave. He silenced the grave, which is what we're going to celebrate this weekend.
Mm.
I think that message is, it's almost, it's more urgent, if that's possible. It's even more urgent, or maybe even more receptive. People are more receptive to that right now. You've probably heard, I saw last week that in kind of Google's, mass analytics, that the Google searches for prayer has just skyrocketed all across the globe. And why is that? Is it because people feel they feel fearful, and they feel there's an insecurity that has kind of thrust upon us. And so I think crisis earns us an opportunity for the church to be confident and to be bold in our security in what Jesus has done for us and who we are, so that we can step into this crisis, not just with physical things like groceries and caring for neighbors, which is great, but we can step into this crisis with sincere hope and peace that is unshakable, even in this time when everything is being shaken. And so I think that this crisis is an opportunity for the church to really push in, promote the gospel. And I think the crisis is really tilling kind of soils in our culture for new gospel seeds to be planted. And so anything we can do to take advantage of that, I think we need to take advantage of that.
Absolutely. I liked what you said, that it's the time to be confident and bold in our hope. Awesome. Shawn, any last words? Like anything, if you could encourage our churches in any way, or would want to say anything, what would you want to say to them right now?
I would say two things. I would say that I read an article last week from the Praxis Journal, which used kind of three images, which I think were really poignant. That they talked about how everything in kind of our media is looking at this as kind of like a blizzard, where we're trying to endure, the next few weeks, and it's like a blizzard comes and we all kind of hunker down, and then we shovel ourselves out and we get back to life as normal. And so even as churches, we've been kind of running, trying to adapt in the short term, right? But the article went forward to say that basically we've got to get out of this blizzard mindset, because at a minimum, we're just at the start of winter, where this is going to be a season that we go into, and there'll be multiple blizzard events. And so we need to prepare for that. But more than likely, we're actually stepping into a mini ice age, where this is going to be the next 12 to 18 months. That this is going to be our reality. And so we really need to think through, how do we continue to make disciples, share the gospel, advance our mission, when for the next long term, everything has been upended and shaken and changed, and all those strategies and structures are all out the window. And so we need to be really like hearing the Spirit's voice, because the Spirit has positioned the church in this time strategically. And so he's going to want to be leading the church. He's going to want to be leading us to seize this time. And so I really think it's time for those in your church who have got leadership gifts and discernment gifts, and who listen to the Spirit, to be praying, say, how do we continue to push into the mission when everything has changed, and not just think, well, how do we get through the next few weeks, and maybe by May everything will go back to normal. And I fear if we keep trying to just kind of maintain what we're doing until things go back to normal, we're going to miss the opportunity. So that would be my first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is that even though how we do discipleship and how we gather the church has all been changed, the call from Jesus to be salt and light has not changed. And one thing that I am fearful, and I hope I am wrong, is that part of being salt, it means that we preserve the rot and the decay in our culture. We champion life. We preserve life. We're the voice for life. And I see this growing movement, and I'm fearful a bit that as the reality of this situation begins to kind of sink in, and as our quality of life and our lifestyle is impacted, And as we all have to start pinching pennies and we can't buy that latest trinket and we can't go on that vacation, there is going to be this growing call to let's just get the economy going. Let's just get back to work. And yeah, we might lose 2% of the people, but that's the price we're going to have to pay. And I think it's going to be so important for the church that I know those are complex issues, but the first principle in the church, the first principle out of Jesus's life is that people matter more than anything. If anything we see from the life of Jesus is that God loves people over everything else. And we will stand before Jesus and he will not ask us. He won't give one rip of how our mutual funds did. He will not ask us what we did to preserve the stock market. He won't care one bit how the Dow did in our lifetime. He's going to ask us, what did we do to protect and preserve the life of people? And so I am fearful that the idols of materialism and consumerism is going to start showing its head in our culture, and people are going to get tired of this, and we will toss aside the vulnerable in our society in order to kind of just get back to making money. And I know those are complex issues, but I think to Jesus's priorities and principles, those are not complex. And so we're going to have to be salt and champion life in this time to come. And also we need to be shining the light. We need to continue to look for ways to lean into those good deeds that would bring glory to our Father. And so, we're going to need the prophetic. I think we're going to need the prophetic voice in our churches in the months to come. And we're also going to need the priestly pastoral deeds displayed in our churches. But
Thank you, Shawn.
Thanks
for speaking from your heart on that.
Thanks.
And thanks. I was just thinking throughout our call, part of our vision as a fellowship is to innovatively develop relationships and resources. And so I want to thank you for very much doing that, even within your church, and then partnering with us. It makes a big difference. And I'm excited about what God is going to continue to do through you and through your church, through all those people you've mobilized to shine his light. And thank you just for being here to encourage us.
Awesome. Thank you for the chance to chat.
And have a great day. Take care of that wife of yours.
I will do that.
I know my husband's in working in a hospital too, so
That's
life
right.
is crazy right now. So take care of that wife of yours and your 3 beautiful girls, and look forward to hearing more of what God is doing.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. At the Fellowship Pacific Ministry Center, our team is committed to serving our churches. To find out more about the resources we have available and how we can support you, visit www.fedpacific.ca.